Dear Dad, your prophecy has come true. May God bless both of you. Do not worry and take good care of yourself. I go to prepare the way. I'm giving my life for a good cause. This was expected, and I'm ready to face it. I die happily. May God protect both of you. Your loving son, John.
John DeLucia was an idealistic young Canadian who volunteered for the Secret Service while serving in the Air Force at the outbreak of World War II. University educated and master of 7 languages, he was parachuted into Verona, Italy, where, caught and revealed as an enemy agent, he would lose his life at the hands of a Nazi firing squad. Hundreds of Canadians volunteered for secret operations during World War II. Many, like John DeLucia, did not come home. This is the story of 3 Canadians who did. Under great personal peril, they risked everything to do their duty behind enemy lines. During World War II, Britain waged a covert war on the European continent against the Axis powers. 2 units of British intelligence, SOE, Special Operations Executive, and MI9, the Escape and Evasion Organization, needed special agents who spoke local languages and could pass for locals behind enemy lines.
Canada was the place where you could find Hungarian speakers or people who spoke Albanian or people who came from a variety of backgrounds across Central Europe and the Mediterranean.
Give me the East European communist from Canada. Churchill wanted us because they are the people. East European came from fascist countries and communist. They are ready to sacrifice. They are the only people we can trust.
Churchill had made that famous, or at least famous amongst those who have followed the subject. We will get behind enemy lines and cause the utmost destruction and set Europe ablaze.
Andrew Durovich was a British secret agent in Hungary and Yugoslavia during World War II. A lifelong communist, Andrew's family fled their native Hungary in 1930 after years of persecution for their political beliefs.
It came to the point where my father had to say, well, I'm going to try it in Canada. And we packed up family and said goodbye to the village.
Like so many before them, Andrew's family arrived in Canada filled with hope and trepidation. They journeyed out west, settling among other Hungarians in Alberta. As they arrived in Edmonton, they witnessed a May Day parade.
It was a relief. We really arrived into a free country. That was something new, and especially to my father. He already visualized that he can march in May Day parades and walk.
Life was hard for Andrew's family in the midst of the Great Depression. Work was scarce. Andrew survived by being a laborer, but his true love was writing.
I didn't see no future for myself. Even with 4 years high school education, it meant a lot to me that I could be more than just farm laborer.
Writing what he saw and he felt about his experiences, Andrew struck a chord with the immigrant farmers of Western Canada.
I wrote as I saw it, as I experienced it, mostly among Hungarian farmers.
His writing for the leftist Canadian-Hungarian Worker newspaper elevated him to prominence within the Communist Party, and he was elected the Hungarian Workers' Delegate to the Communist National Convention in Toronto.
At the convention, with a unanimous vote, I was elected as an organizer for the Hungarian movement in Saskatchewan, a provincial organizer. A young man, 22 years old.
Andrew's commitment to the cause forced him to leave behind in Alberta both family and a promise of marriage to his young sweetheart.
When you were a revolutionary, you sacrificed your life, and you sacrificed your utmost, even your life.
During that conference in Toronto, Andrew ran into a friend who gave him news.
You know, and the news said 4 o'clock, Germany attacked Poland. The World War broke out, the Second World War.
Andrew could only watch from the sidelines as the war raged in Europe. There was nothing he could do until after the collapse of the Nazi-Soviet pact in 1941. Then, British intelligence needed communist sympathizers to go behind enemy lines in Eastern Europe. The Canadian government, through the RCMP, contacted the Communist Party of Canada, and before long, Andrew was asked by the party to meet with a Mr. Simpson, an SOE agent.
I think it was the third or fourth door just below Queen Street. There was a civilian there, and he just invited us, please take a seat. Somebody showed up and introduced himself as Simpson. Then he asked us a few questions. It didn't last very long. And the indication was in his questions that to let us feel that you accept or not, it's a dangerous assignment. And he said, how come you are volunteering to the secret force to go back to Hungary? Did you give it any thought? Yes, I said, I know what I'm volunteering for, and I'm not going back to my country of birth, my motherland. I'm going back to the fascist system. This is what I want to destroy and to get rid of Hitlerism and Admiral Horthy in Hungary.
The persecution of his family in fascist Hungary had left a profound effect on young Andrew. His idealism, bolstered by Marxist-Leninist theory, sought a worker's paradise in his native country, and he wanted to be part of that struggle.
Canadians served in two very different organizations. The most Canadians, the largest number of Canadians, served in an organization called Special Operations Executive. Its principal purpose was to assist the local underground, the local resistance, in their sabotage efforts.
So we waited the whole year, then we were called up for training at Camp X. And we knew that we were right at home in something special, and that was Camp X.
Camp ST-103, or Camp X, near Whitby, Ontario, was primarily a place for the training of agents who acted in the Western Hemisphere in various clandestine ways. Training was really another word for attempting to discern who had the right stuff and those who didn't.
We were trained that with a strike like this, I could kill a man. Hit him right here. Boom! And he's on, goodbye. The man is killed.
Only later did the more sophisticated training come in terms of wireless or sabotage for factories, for roads, for bridges.
Our chief instructor, he was a real son of a bitch. He really drilled us, by God. But then we loved him for it. And he said one time, I'm going to write to Churchill, give me a dozen bloody Hungarians and a dozen bloody Scots, and we're going to fuck Hitler. As simple as that.
Andrew emerged from his basic training at Camp X as a suitable candidate for SOE. His education as a secret agent continued in England with intensive courses on radio operation, demolition, and parachuting.
Typically, an SOE agent would parachute into an underground network in one part of France or occupied Europe and work in that area and stay more or less in that area until he or she was taken out again, assuming they survived.
the question of danger, and so it never entered our mind, because we were really so confident. We just had to go fight fascism.
Most SOE Eastern European infiltration embarked from Cairo, where up-to-date intelligence was disseminated and agents were ready to go at a moment's notice. For Andrew, memories of Cairo would be bittersweet.
We were just walking toward the station with my buddy. There was a coffee house, a groppy, they call it, and I think there were 4 boys and one girl, that girl, and they were in a hot debate, debating about something, and the loudest was this girl arguing. And we came closer and we stopped a little distance, and sure enough, they speak Hungarian, so we stepped forward and we greeted them in Hungarian. And they looked at us from Canada, Hungarians. They could hardly conceive Hungarians from Canada in Cairo in British uniform, the same uniform as they are in.
The group was like Andrew, SOE agents waiting for their final mission briefing. The woman among them was Hannah Senes, a Hungarian Jew who had fled fascist Hungary to Palestine. Her Marxist views made her an ideal recruit for the SOE.
She was so excited and so interested in Canada. Tell me about Canada. And she looked at me, I looked at her. Then somehow our hands just met. Just met, and that's all. And then we were touched and all, and then sort of I grabbed her hand and squeezed a little bit, see, and that was, it put the stamp on our life.
Hannah and Andrew would meet privately in a park by the Nile. There, they would talk about the countries they had left behind and discuss their dreams for the future of Hungary.
And we both had it in our bones already that there going to be a different situation after the war in Hungary. It wouldn't be no fascist Hungary or semi-fascist Hungary, but when the Red Army going to liberate Hungary, there'll be something else, a country that will fit our taste also. Not counting in the danger that we faced where we are going into the lion cage, but anyway, it's young hearts, and so you plan and you have illusions, and the love was there, right there.
Hannah Senes was the first to parachute into Yugoslavia, with Hungary as her ultimate destination.
She told me to look for her after the war, look for her as Hannah Senes.
Well, I met my husband, Lucien, through a friend. I got sick the first day I met him, and I passed out for the only time of my life in the living room, and he took care of me all night. I said, oh, what a nice man. You know, he gave me confidence. I know that I could depend on him all my life, but that was the first impression and never changed.
You felt that at the first meeting.
Lucien Dumais, another of Canada's unknown heroes, was a very successful secret agent. His secret mission within occupied France saved hundreds of lives. Today, he is remembered by his wife Odette and his comrade Marguerite.
We all felt a prisoner of the German, you know. Any way we could, we had to do something to push them back from France with the great help of the Alliés, you know.
Marguerite Carrière, a dancer and entertainer, was recruited by Dumais in Paris and assisted in one of the most daring yet successful Allied escape networks of the Second World War. The network's objective was to spirit downed aviators to the coast of Brittany, where boats would smuggle them to safety back in Britain.
The airmen, in 1 or 2 instances, were back in Britain within 48 hours of being shot down in occupied France. And they were back again in squadron service not very long after that.
He was able to return 305 men back to work, and that was really important to him.
Born in Montreal in a family of 9, Lucien revered in war games as a child. Rejected because of height by the police force, he joined the Montreal Fusiliers and volunteered overseas when World War II broke out. He rose quickly to the rank of sergeant of a small platoon while training in England. The true test of his knowledge was still to come. In the early days of the war, downed Allied aviators over occupied France were easily captured and taken prisoner. It was essential that they be rescued and returned to Britain. MI9, the Escape and Evasion Division of British Intelligence, needed French-speaking agents. And where better to find them than among the French-Canadian forces?
What's notable about the Canadian contribution is that they drew upon a range of backgrounds, of experience, of ethnic diversity that made them rather special. But they also shared with the other SOE agents and MI9 agents that essential quality of courage.
In August of 1942, Lucien Dumay, among thousands of Canadian soldiers, made a valiant assault on a small coastal village in France named Dieppe. But mere valor would not be enough. More than 900 Canadian soldiers were killed and close to 2,000 taken prisoner in the battle for Dieppe, which came to serve as a rehearsal for D-Day. Lucien Dumay survived, more committed than ever to the Allied cause.
The badly injured were taken in French hospitals, and the ones still capable of walking were taken about 16 kilometers out of Dieppe in an old factory. They were put in a train 2 days after the raid from Dieppe to go to Germany. And he decided to escape. Then he and 2 other companions, they jumped out of the train. Then he managed to get to the south of France. And then there he met with the French resistance.
Lucien had lost many of his close friends at Dieppe. The old regiment was decimated, and he could not return to it. Lucien decided to join MI9, the Escape and Evasion Division of British Intelligence.
The 2 principal agents, Ray Labrosse and Lucien Dumay, made their way through occupied France with the help of MI9, through Spain to Gibraltar, back to Britain, were recruited by MI9 on the grounds that they knew a good deal by then of occupied France and indeed something of the operations of MI9, and they would be ideal agents.
They told him that they would like to send him to France to establish a network to rescue the airmen and so on. And they had a man the name was Raymond Labrosse, who had been in France few months before with another group.
Lucien Dumay and Raymond Labrosse landed in a hidden airfield east of Paris that November. Recruiting agents from the French resistance, by the new year they had established the escape network secretly known as Shelburne. They rescued hundreds of Air Force personnel during World War II.
They did very well indeed. They quietly and effectively organized escape lines, worked with French people of the greatest courage who helped to get the airmen from their point of landing by parachute after their aircraft had been shot down.
Members of the Shelburne group, including Marguerite, would retrieve the airmen from their refuge and smuggle them into Paris, where Raymond Labrosse informed London by radio of a package ready to go.
They cannot say on the radio, we have 10 airmen because the radio could have been caught by the German. Then they would say we have 10 parcels.
A secret apartment in Paris served as the first sanctuary for Allied airmen on the run, with Marguerite arranging provision.
At the time, the men, they could buy 1 or 2 packs of cigarettes a month. Some of them didn't smoke, so I used to rescue that. I buy them black market, you know, high price. And with those cigarettes, with my bike, I should go in a small farmer country and against cigarette to buy potatoes, eggs, and something, you know, like that. And I used to bring the food to that place in Paris, you know.
An agent might be taken, or several agents might take a group of airmen as local workers and carry them from Paris out to the coast. It would take a day and a half or 2 days on French railways, which were always under surveillance by the enemy. And that took a particular type of courage and a particular knowledge of occupied France, how to travel on trains without attracting undue attention.
Lucien and his group would convey their packages north to the coast of Brittany, to the transfer point Bonaparte Beach. There, they waited for transport, staying in a safe house called La Maison d'Alphonse.
Maison d'Alphonse was a small countryside house, very close to the beach, and they had a kind of upper level. They bring the airmen and waiting for the last minute to go on the beach.
Bonsoir tout le monde, à la Maison d'Alphonse. Je répète, bonsoir tout le monde.
They were listening to the BBC at night. Then when they heard that bonsoir tout le monde à la Maison d'Alphonse, that was the messages that the following night they were coming to the beach to get the parcels, the airmen.
On moonless nights, Lucien guided the airmen down to the beach and waited with them for the arrival of various transports, sometimes right under the German noses.
They didn't find any sign of any suspicion about the network, and nobody was caught from the network.
They did really extraordinarily well, and they are amongst the most effective of the agents that we sent into occupied Europe.
Many memories came back in my mind, you know, and we always have been so faithful in friendship. If I have the opportunity to have done more, I will have been more happy than today again.
I respect my captain.
My father came from China by selling junk. It takes over more than 3 months. And the junk has no motor. But if they have no wind, they were stuck in the middle of the ocean. My father tells me that half of the Chinese never get ashore because they never make it.
William Chong's father did make it. He arrived at the turn of the century in Vancouver, BC, and found work as a kitchen helper for $5 a week, eventually becoming a millionaire.
The Chinese only allow works in the laundry, cannery, a lumber yard, a railroad. But there's no promotion. Everybody, you work all your life, you get the same pay. That's why I took up cooking. The reason a cook can have some promotion. So I want to be a cook.
Bill Chong's ambitions would have to wait. Informed by letter from his sister in 1940 that the family estate was being sold, he would have to return to mainland China for his share. Bill sailed, but he was unable to reach the mainland because of the war, and he was forced to wait in Hong Kong.
I never reached China because Japanese occupy China and they occupy Hong Kong.
During the Second World War, imperialist Japan, wanting to expand its borders, invaded China and captured Hong Kong. Bill Chong took refuge with his sister.
I was living with one of my sisters in Hong Kong, a small place. We have a little balcony. One evening, there's a Canadian soldier. He had one pip. I presume he's a second lieutenant. And he speaks in English. He asked for water. He was wounded. And the Japanese there stand by a crowd, look at him, didn't do anything until one Japanese officer came along. And he reaches in the back. I thought he would bring up a water bottle, but instead he took out a pistol, shot him, and killed him right on the spot. And to me, I said, how can anybody do a thing like that? He could held him as prisoner, take him away. He couldn't fight anymore. But why kill him? And I got very mad. And I said, no, I got to get out of here. I don't want to stay in Hong Kong.
Bill Chong escaped to British-controlled Free China, expecting to return to Canada. However, he was approached by an Australian doctor named Lindsay Rye with an offer of a job for British intelligence.
He said, now, the job we're going to give you, we're not going to tell you yet, but the only thing we can tell you is if you ever, this job is volunteer. If you ever get caught, then no one in the world can help you.
British intelligence desperately needed Chinese-speaking agents to rescue British nationals and allies trapped behind enemy lines. Dr. Rye headed BAG, the British Army Advisory Group, which covered for intelligence.
The British Army Advisory Group, as it was called in China, was not a British Army Advisory Group. It was, in fact, SOE and MI9 rolled into one and under another name, cover name.
Bill accepted Lindsay Rye's offer and was immediately instructed to go to Macau. There he would be given his assignment. But Macau was difficult to enter. It was occupied by the Japanese and extremely dangerous for a British agent.
They, the Japanese, the Kemtai, the Japanese Gestapo, if you wish, had agents throughout the Chinese resistance, and the amount of betrayal and the amount of double cross was quite extraordinary.
With the help of local bandits, Bill Chong entered Macau. There, his assignment was revealed.
We have a British consulate there. His name is Ree. He has no communication outside of Macau because Japanese cut off all the communication. They're listening into everything he talked to, and my job was to find out if he's still alive, if he need help. The code word, if anybody gonna talk to him, the code word is Snow White. I quickly went to the consulate, and to my surprise, because Japanese had Chinese gendarmes all over the British consulate outside. But how am I going to get in? If I know we were going to get in, I won't be able to come out.
The next day, Bill Chong went to a grocer, purchased some canned goods and a box of soap. Posing as a grocery delivery boy, he entered the embassy grounds and knocked on Mr. Reeves' door. The houseboy refused to let him in.
I make such a big fuss, and then he come out. He looked at me. He said, "What's the big fuss?" And I said, "You, Mr. Reeves?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "You buy some Snow White soap." In those days, there's no Snow White soap. He said, "No, I didn't buy any Snow White soap." I said, "Snow White." I had to say about 3 times. And then he said, realize that was the code word. He told the cook and the houseboy, said, "Okay, let me go in." And he took me in the room, and he locked the door, and he pulled out a little pistol. I said, "Who you gonna shoot, sir?" He said, "That's the only protection I have. The police don't protect me, and the Japanese are around me. I don't dare to go out the house."
The Japanese were, if anything, more brutal and more immediate in their execution of any agents. They simply killed without much discrimination, and if anyone was thought to be an agent, kill him.
Agents were entirely on their own during a mission, with only the local partisans to assist in their goals. Andrew parachuted into Slovakia, and with the help of the resistance, secretly entered his native land of Hungary.
I was given a contact to contact the underground movement in Hungary, the resistance movement, and then utilize all my knowledge, all my experience, and so to help them to succeed, to sabotage the Germans and the Hungarian fascists.
Hungary was a difficult area of operation for SOE. It never really was very successful in Hungary, largely because of betrayals and of exposure by one group or another of agents who were not of their persuasion.
Aided by rural partisans, Andrew disguised himself as a peasant and made his way to Budapest. But the Budapest of his youth had changed.
The Arrow Cross Party took power. In a few hours' time, everything, the radio, the railway, and key points were in the hand of the fascist party, and it was a mob. The country was so infested. There is no possibility of organizing anything, any wide and effective resistance that I laid out for them. Well, I had to decide, but there's only one way to escape, and go back to Slovakia and see what I find there and what they can do.
Andrew found his way back into Slovakia. He discovered that the local resistance there had been smashed. Andrew was isolated and alone. He would have to make it back to where he landed, leave Slovakia, and end his mission.
I walked out of the village and into a cornfield where I felt sure enough that I wouldn't be seen. I crawled out from the cornfield, crouched down like this, and hastened to get over the other side and just throw myself in. When I was at the middle, halt! And the German Lugers facing me.
Just 50 yards from the Slovak border and freedom, suddenly all was lost. He prepared for the worst.
If captured, secret agents in terms of warfare are regarded as fair game for execution. Whatever the method of execution, the fact remains that agents were regularly executed. Very few survived the war.
It was thrown to me at about 100 times if I was a Soviet agent. That's what they wanted to know.
The Gestapo were highly developed in creating effective methods of interrogation. On Andrew, they used electric shock.
There was a table like a heavy billiard table, and they stretched me out. They had a shocking machine, and then they turned it in an arm, and then they turned it and jerked it. Turned it and then jerked it again, and it really gave me a shock. It's the most horrifying feeling. That when they give you that electric shock, it shakes your brain to a point when you feel that you are alive, but you are going mad.
Following his interrogation, Andrew was held in Budapest. But with Budapest under siege from the Russian army, he was able to escape with a small group of partisans. When the Russians took the city, the war was over for Andrew Durovich.
Hitler proclaimed fascism is here for the next 1,000 years. We can't accept it.
My mission is to rescue any nationality if they're British subject. I'm to help them get out of enemy territory and get into free China to safety.
Bill Chong used the Chinese sampan to smuggle his charges out of Japanese territory, the first being 3 very large Norwegian pilots.
You know how big the Norwegian is? I never met them. So I brought him to this guy, Sam. Oh, he said, no. I said, what for? He said, too tall. I said, well, I can't cut them out. He said, now, must have more money. Maybe can do. I said, okay, I pay. And he said, when you go in the sampan, he must kneel on the floor. He can't sit on the seat. They each give him a little rod, pretend to be a fisherman, and they watch the Japanese spotlight. Like in the movie, soon as spotlight go by, they roll. They really roll. Oh. Then he says, when you get across, you don't walk. You stand underneath the seagrass. The seagrass is very tall. But still, this 3 guys taller than the seagrass. They got a kneel. And we wait till dawn, we start walking. But I got them back safely.
Bill Chong was never caught, but one mission from Macau to Hong Kong was particularly harrowing.
This boatman, he had a Japanese flag on his boat. And I thought maybe that would probably save. So we went on the boat. On the second day, a Japanese patrol come by. They asked the boatman, why are he hosting a Japanese flag? Have he got permission to use Japanese flag? This boatman can speak Japanese. The more he speaks Japanese to the Japanese, he's about half the size, the Japanese is half the size of this boatman. He's a big, tall guy. He gets slapped, beaten, all over.
For 3 days, they were held without food or water. On the 4th day, both passengers and crew were ordered into the cargo hold, and the Japanese nailed planks over the door and set them adrift.
The boatman finally went on the back of the junk. He used the elbow and knocked off a piece of plank. And when he knocked off one piece, he took off another piece. He can crawl out. I said, that will be the last we're going to see him. He can swim, but we couldn't get him. We couldn't swim. We don't know which way to swim to. He got out. About a few minutes later, we heard the hatch. Somebody opening the hatch. It's the boatman. He opened the hatch, and we all come up on deck. What a relief.
Throughout the war, Bill Chong rescued people from all sorts of professions and nationalities without losing one.
I'm like a bus driver. Anybody come my bus, they get a ride. That's it. My job is finished.
Through their selfless actions and boundless courage, these are the forgotten heroes of a war that created our modern world. After the war, Andrew returned to Canada, becoming editor of the Communist Workers' Party magazine. And he wrote a book on his SOE activities entitled My Secret Mission. After a long period of time, Andrew finally found out what happened to Hannah Sennish.
About 3 or 4 years later, I found this book in the Nageb bookstore in Toronto, on Bathurst Street. And when I read the book, and then I said, well, here is my Hannah. Yeah. And from then on, I say, a scar on your heart, on your soul, and your whole being for a lifetime. And there she is.
Hannah was captured in Hungary, suffering imprisonment and torture before her execution. Shortly before facing a firing squad, she wrote this poem.
1, 2, 3, 8 feet long. 2 strides across, the rest is dark. Life hangs over me like a question mark. 1, 2, 3, maybe another week, or next month may still find me here, but death, I feel, is very near. I could have been 23 next July. I gambled on what mattered most, The dice were cast. I lost.
Andrew was to give a speech on the anniversary of Hannah Senish's death during Holocaust Week. But once again, he was denied by fate as he died at the age of 86, shortly after this interview was filmed. Lucien Dumay worked with the Free French forces after the war. He returned to Montreal with his wife Odette, where he died in 1993. For his extraordinary success as an MI9 agent and for the Battle of Dieppe, Lucien received 17 medals. He wrote a book entitled The Man Who Went Back, and 119 pilots were grateful that he did.
All the people from the network did a great job, and I think we are now owning them the kind of life we have.
Where he can, maybe from somewhere, he still can see us. Yeah.
William Chong served with British intelligence until 1976, his cover of restaurateur coinciding with his original ambition. His restaurant business became quite successful. However, to this day, he still goes unrecognized for his war efforts by Canada's Veterans Affairs Department.
They said, I'm a resistant. And I asked them, then resistant get killed too? But the Legion accept me as a vet. That makes me very proud. My daughter and I were very close. She always said, Dad, what you're doing, we're doing for God. Yeah, all right.
As for John DeLucia, the details of his war efforts, like so many other Canadians who served behind the lines during World War II, remain a mystery. A cellmate of John's, Henry Parker, wrote this letter to his parents after John's execution.
Dear Sir, I was dropped by parachute in occupied Italy for sabotage purposes, sentenced to be shot and put in the same prison as John. I escaped being shot on account of a typist error. I'm afraid John was not so lucky. In the evenings, when the guards were all around the outer wall of the prison and the cells were locked up for the night, we all used to sing to keep ourselves occupied. John used to sing a song called White Christmas, and he sung it very well. But now there are quite a lot of us who don't like to hear that song anymore. His death was a blow to us all, as he was a man of very strong character, and he certainly taught me a lot about patience and tolerance, which I didn't know before. I'm sorry I have to tell you all this. I wish he could have had our luck. Henry Parker, 1945, England.
These people are an integral part of our history. They fought for us with the valor of regular soldiers, alone and isolated, but without glory of victory. Perhaps the bravest of the brave, they did their duty behind enemy lines.